like, bro.
She got a kid. Look at his back. Oh my god. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to another reaction to another Thomas Sowell video. You know, this is the real history of slavery, part 4. You know, we had done a few other parts before. This was like 2 hours long, so we're most likely going to be breaking this up to about 9-10 parts. You know, try to get a little bit into it. You know, I shared a bit of my knowledge of what I know about slavery and just like the overall aspect of the time and the context and all that other stuff. The history that led to the overall abolishment of the act, at least within the Western world. Let us know if you want to see more Thomas Sowell down in the comments. You know, if you want to check out some of our old reactions to him, we got a whole playlist for the videos we've done from before. Go check out our other playlists. Go check out our other channels. 412 Show, LB Gaming. We just started the Mad Max Fury Road game on there, so we got some new content coming up on that. But we're gonna hop right in.
And judicial staff in Zanzibar in trying cases and dealing with reports, etc. Even so, the results were slow in coming. More streamlined slave ships were designed in hopes of being able to outrun the ships of the Royal Navy in the Atlantic. Nevertheless, the dogged persistence of the British eventually reduced the shipment of slaves across the Atlantic and across the waters of the Islamic world. Although the French flag was for many years widely used as protection from the boarding of ships on the high seas by the British Navy, even by slave traders who were neither French nor authorized to fly the French flag, eventually France itself turned against slavery, outlawed the institution, and sent some of its own warships to patrol the Atlantic off the coast of Africa to intercept and deter the shipment of slaves to the Western Hemisphere. The American flag was likewise so used, and the United States, like France, eventually turned against the slave trade and sent warships to join the Atlantic patrols to interdict slave shipments. Although by 1860, the Atlantic slave trade had been effectively stopped, the slave trade from East Africa across the Indian Ocean, the Red Sea, and the Persian Gulf took longer to be reduced significantly. Off the east coast of Africa, smaller Arab vessels called dhows hugged the coastlines in waters too shallow for the British warships to enter. One British commodore estimated that he captured one dhow for every 8 that escaped. Nevertheless, during the period from 1866 to 1869, 129 slave vessels were captured and 3,380 slaves were freed. When the threat of being boarded seemed imminent, the Arabs would throw slaves overboard to drown, rather than have them be found on board, which could lead to British seizure of the vessel and punishment of those who manned it. The worst that could befall the slaves was when the slaver was overhauled by a British cruiser, and they might then be flung overboard to dispose of all evidence. Devereux mentions a case where the Arabs, when pursued by an English cruiser, cut the throats of 24 slaves and threw them overboard. Colomb also states that Arabs would not hesitate to knock slaves on the head and throw them overboard to avoid capture.
Jesus Christ, nigga. Man, how lucky you are to be living in the modern times of today.
He just said cut their throat, throw them
Easy
overboard.
Cut his throat and throw him overboard.
When we cut his throat, they weren't dead yet. Just threw them overboard. Now you
Yeah, it's like they still.
now you got water still going down your lungs.
Salt water too, man.
Oh man, that's ridiculous.
Then you was already on a boat, like
You're in the middle of the
chained
ocean.
up. You're in the middle of the ocean, like you're on this mass amount of water, probably seasick, not very clean. You know, these are probably small little vessels that, like you said, that claim to the coast. They didn't have like a maritime navy like the British did at this point. Not no Ottoman empires or any Asian kingdom or just empire at that time had any type of naval force to really stand up to the British. That's why they had to go out of their way and like do this. Like arrest other nations' ships for selling slaves. Can you imagine having that much power to be able to just arrest another nation's
Fleet.
like fleet and stuff just because you have slaves? I mean, that's good. That's what they were doing.
That's good.
I mean, yeah, because if they weren't arresting niggas, most likely niggas would still be slaves. We probably wouldn't be sitting here doing this video right now because our ancestors wouldn't have even likely migrated to this area in the United States. Most likely would have been reserved to wherever area of the world that they were at the point. Globalization is a crazy thing, guys. You'd be surprised like how many times people moving around the planet, what ethnic groups were here and here.
Because there were only a few naval ships available to cover a vast expanse of water in this region, British warships would often launch smaller boats to engage the Arab slave dhows. In these cases, as one study put it, the slave traffickers frequently did not hesitate to attack boat crews in defense of their profits. Battles between the Arabs' vessels and the smaller British craft were especially likely when the larger ships that launched them were too far away to reach the scene in time to join the battle. In other cases, the Arabs fled even from the smaller British vessels. An episode in 1866 was typical. On 26 April 1866, the Penguin set out after a dhow and fired several shots in an effort to make the crew come to. When the dhow failed to lower its sail, Gartorth felt certain that she was a slaver and ceased firing for the sake of the slaves on board. However, he managed to close with the dhow, which then made for the rocks through a heavy surf. By the time the ship's boats could be lowered to follow, the Arab crew had fled, but the pounding surf made any attempt by the slavers to salvage the human cargo too dangerous. To their horror, the boat crew found that they too could not reach the dhow, which was rapidly filling with water, drowning the slaves. The boat officer decided that he could not risk coming in close to the dhow, but several of the crewmen of the cutter recklessly dived in and swam through the surf to the dhow.
Crazy.
In a remarkable display of courage, the sailors managed to bring 28 of the slaves back to the boat.
It's like his job.
The dhow appeared to have had more than 200 slaves on board, and most died in the pounding waves. In another episode, the Arabs' ruthlessness toward the slaves was further revealed. When the Daphne's cutter captured a dhow with 156 slaves on board, many were found to be in the final stages of starvation and dysentery. One woman was brought out of the dhow with a month-old infant in her arms. The baby's forehead was crushed, and when she was asked how the injury had happened, she explained to the ship's interpreter that as the boat came alongside, the baby began to cry. One of the dowmen, fearing that the sailors would hear the cries, picked up a stone and crushed the child's head. This was not a unique act.
One hit?
British missionary and explorer David Livingstone related a similar incident on land. One woman who was unable to carry both her load and young child had the child taken from her and saw its brains dashed out on a stone.
That's ridiculous.
Dr. Livingstone also reported having nightmares for weeks after encountering.
I don't know, man.
You say it's a baby's head on a stone. Like, this is pretty wild.
That's a lot.
It's like they really
It's a lot
got
of trauma back then.
got to do what they want. It was like, to them, black people were like ants to like humans.
Well, at that time, you weren't even considered human at all. You were property and cargo.
You're like, you step on an ant.
Especially within the realm of...
Like, do you think about when you step on an ant?
I don't
Like
know.
at all?
Well, it doesn't take much effort to kill an ant. But I guess at that time, it wouldn't have took much effort to kill the slaves. Because as you've seen multiple times through these various examples,
Slitting people's throats and
because they
stuff.
would just pretty much rid of them like they were like it was like a thing of tea, like it's the Boston Tea Party.
Like you throwing away some plastic in the garbage.
It was like, I don't know, bro. It's just like you can tell there was a lot of trauma back then. And for anyone to have to witness stuff like that, like there's been a little small inkling of things, but I just been like, I know if I've seen this or maybe experienced this, I would be.
You'd be in a corner.
I don't know about that, but maybe, who knows? Like maybe I'd just be a completely different person. Like you don't understand the type of stuff that you were seeing at this time, especially since it was like mundane, normal almost. Like it just had to have been a terrifying time to be alive, especially for certain groups of people. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Arab slave traders and their victims. Not only was this Christian missionary shocked by the brutality of the Arab slave traders, so was Muhammad Ali, the ruler of Egypt, who was a battle-hardened military commander. None of this means that the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade should be ignored, downplayed, or excused, nor have they been. A vast literature has detailed the vile conditions under which slaves from Africa lived and died during their voyages to the Western Hemisphere. But the much less publicized slave trade to the Islamic countries had even higher mortality rates en route, as well as involving larger numbers of people over the centuries, even though the Atlantic slave trade had higher peaks while it lasted. By a variety of accounts, most of the slaves who were marched across the Sahara toward the Mediterranean died on the way. While these were mostly women and girls, the males faced a special danger: castration, to produce the eunuchs in demand as harem attendants in the Islamic world.
I can't even imagine.
Because castration was forbidden by Islamic
That was
law,
something he said in that
the
one
operation
video
tended
that
to
I
be
went to.
performed, usually crudely, in the hinterlands, before the slave caravans reached places within the effective control of the Ottoman Empire. The great majority of those operating
in an
on
African country,
died as a result,
circumcising or warriors.
but the price of eunuchs was so much higher than the price of
They eat
other
the force
slaves
games.
that the practice was still profitable on net balance. The British Governor General of the Sudan, C.G. Gordon, estimated that between 1875 and 1879, from 80,000 to 100,000 slaves were exported through his region. General Gordon imposed the death penalty on those convicted of castrating slave men to market them as eunuchs. His attempt
How did
to
they
stamp out
castrate
slave
people back
trading
then?
in the Sudan cost him his own
Right,
life
just
as an
his own.
opposing army raised and led by Muhammad Mahat.
Yeah. I remember he had talked about that castration thing. Like every single male
I'm like, this is
slave
back in 1800s.
in the Ottoman Empire that was circulating through the realm, castrated. Most likely they used like a really hot knife and they just quickly cut shit off so it like seared and like burned it so when you wouldn't bleed out, but you would like
Oh.
if you didn't die of the shock, you just didn't have, they cut everything off,
You think you can
So
take
pretty
that,
much, huh?
you think you can take that pain?
I don't know, man.
No,
I can't let you cut my balls off and I don't.
man. Do nothing.
Like, I gotta bite your neck or something. I gotta. Even if you kill me up there, I don't care. I got no reason to live. That's why they did it. That's why they cut your balls off so you ain't have nothing else to think about. You're not producing the testosterone, the sexual hormones no more. They're just.
I gotta
Might
bite
as well be a
your
slave
neck
now, I guess.
off.
You got nothing else to live for. Just go ahead and slave away, man. Go ahead.
That's
That's wild as hell, dog.
that's beyond wild.
And over 12 million people were brought to this region. So that's not all of them were men. So you have to probably think about half of them, 6 million people maybe, 5 million were men completely castrated. How many generations was that going on the drain? Just completely just gone. Never know what that could have amounted to. I don't know. It's crazy. It's still going on too. It could come back. I don't know. Things looking kind of crazy in this world. Not everything's always set in stone.
Mm-hmm.
I think knowledge is power. You just think you gotta understand the history, the past. You gotta understand the present, and just be able to make the conscious decisions to be aware. Yeah.
We know what to do.
Yeah. So let us know if you want to see more Thomas Sowell down in the comments. Hit that like button, subscribe, and share. Road to 10K. We'll see you next time.
Peace.